The industrial vacuum cleaner roared in my ears, drowning out the muffled conversations from the penthouse suite's main room. My lower back throbbed with the familiar ache that came from 12-hour shifts at the Grandeur Imperial Hotel. But I kept moving, kept working, kept my head down. That was the rule for girls like me. Be invisible, efficient, forgettable. I'd perfected the art of invisibility over the past 3 years, ever since I'd fled my hometown with nothing but the clothes on my back and memories I desperately wanted to erase. At 20, I was already an expert at blending into expensive wallpaper, at seeing everything while appearing to notice nothing. The penthouse suite on the 42nd floor was reserved for VIPs only, the kind of guests who paid more for a weekend than I earned in 6 months. Today's occupant was Rico Marciano, a name whispered in the hotel's service corridors with equal parts fear and fascination. I didn't need to read newspapers to know what kind of business he conducted. The sharp suits and sharper eyes of his security detail told me everything. I moved methodically through the sitting room, dusting surfaces that were already pristine, straightening pillows that hadn't been disturbed. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled below us, a glittering maze of steel and ambition. Up here, the city's noise was reduced to a distant hum, replaced by the artificial silence of wealth and power. "Nina, you missed a spot near the bar." Marco, the head of housekeeping, appeared in the doorway, his voice clipped with perpetual disapproval. His eyes flickered to my midsection before returning to my face, a reminder that he'd noticed my attempts to hide my condition. 3 months along, and already my uniform was getting tight. "Yes, sir," I murmured, redirecting my attention to the marble bar that ran along one wall. The surface gleamed under the recessed lighting, bottles of liquor worth more than my monthly rent arranged with military precision. Marco lingered, his presence making my skin crawl. "Mr. Marciano's team is very particular about privacy. You finish this room and move on. No dawdling, no curiosity. Understand?" I nodded, keeping my eyes lowered. Curiosity was dangerous in my line of work, especially when it came to men like Rico Marciano. I'd learned that lesson the hard way 3 years ago, when my father's curiosity about his employer's business dealings had gotten him killed. The memory hit me like it always did, sudden and visceral. The sound of the gunshot, the way his body had crumpled, the blood spreading across our kitchen floor while I hid in the pantry, 17 years old and paralyzed with terror. My father had been an accountant for a local businessman, and he'd discovered something he shouldn't have. 3 men had come to our house that night, men he'd thought were his friends, his colleagues. The betrayal had been the worst part. Not strangers, but people he'd trusted, people who'd eaten at our table and laughed at his jokes. They'd executed him while his partner, a man my father had considered his best friend, had watched without intervening. I forced myself back to the present, to the vacuum cleaner in my hands, and the expensive suite around me. I'd survived by learning to recognize the signs of betrayal, the subtle shifts in loyalty that preceded violence. It was a skill I'd never wanted, but one that had kept me alive. The door to the bedroom opened, and 2 men emerged, their voices low and urgent. I kept vacuuming, my eyes on the carpet, but my ears caught fragments of their conversation. "Schedule change. Tonight, instead of tomorrow. Dominic confirmed the shipment. Boss wants everyone at the warehouse by midnight." I recognized them as part of Marciano's security detail. I'd seen them during my previous shifts in this suite, always present, always watchful. But something about their body language now made my instincts prickle with unease. The taller one, a man with a scar running along his jawline, glanced in my direction. I immediately looked away, focusing intently on a non-existent stain on the carpet. Invisible. Forgettable. Safe. They moved past me toward the suite's entrance, their conversation dropping to whispers. I should have ignored it, should have continued my work and forgotten whatever I'd overheard. But that familiar tingling at the base of my spine, the one that had saved my life once before, made me pause. I'd seen this before. The furtive glances, the sudden change in routine, the careful distance maintained from their employer. These weren't men coordinating security. They were men planning something they didn't want their boss to know about. The realization sent ice through my veins. I'd watched my father die because he'd stumbled onto a conspiracy, and I'd sworn never to get involved in other people's dangerous business again. But if I was right, if these men were planning what I thought they were planning. The bedroom door opened again, and this time, Rico Marciano himself stepped out. I'd only seen him from a distance before, a tall figure surrounded by bodyguards, always in motion, always projecting an aura of controlled power. Up close, he was even more imposing. He stood well over 6 feet, with the kind of athletic build that came from discipline rather than vanity. Dark hair showed threads of silver at the temples, and his face had the sharp angles of someone who'd been handsome in his youth and had aged into something more dangerous. But it was his eyes that caught me, held me frozen despite my training in invisibility. Storm gray and penetrating, they swept the room with the assessment of a predator, cataloging every detail, every potential threat. "You're new," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my chest. I fumbled with the vacuum cleaner, nearly dropping the hose. "I've worked here for 3 years, sir, just usually on different floors." His gaze sharpened, focusing on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You look familiar." Panic fluttered in my chest. I couldn't look familiar. I'd left my old life behind, changed my name, altered my appearance. There was no way he could recognize me. "I have one of those faces, sir," I managed, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Common, unremarkable." A slight smile curved his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I doubt anything about you is unremarkable." Before I could formulate a response, one of his bodyguards entered the room, the scarred man from earlier. "Mr. Marciano, the car is ready when you are." Rico nodded, still watching me. "I'll be down shortly, Carlo." Carlo. I filed the name away automatically, another useless piece of information my paranoid brain insisted on cataloging. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable, before retreating back into the hallway. "What's your name?" Rico asked, drawing my attention back to him. The lie came easily. "Nina Russo, sir." "Nina," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "You work hard. I've been here 3 days, and every time I return, this suite is immaculate." The compliment caught me off guard. Men like him didn't notice the staff, didn't acknowledge the invisible hands that maintain their environments. "Thank you, sir. I do my best." He moved closer, and I instinctively took a step back, my hip hitting the edge of the bar. My hand automatically moved to my abdomen, a protective gesture I immediately regretted when his eyes tracked the movement. "Are you afraid of me, Nina?" I should have lied, should have laughed off the suggestion, maintained my cover of blandness. Instead, the truth slipped out. "I'm afraid of what you represent." His eyebrows rose slightly. "And what do I represent?" "Power without accountability, danger dressed in expensive suits, the kind of trouble that ruins lives." The words hung between us, too honest, too revealing. I waited for anger, for the casual threat that would remind me of my place. Instead, Rico laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features. "You're not wrong," he admitted, "but you're also not telling me the whole truth. There's something else behind that fear." He was too perceptive, too intelligent. This was why men like him rose to power. They could read people, anticipate threats, identify weaknesses. I needed to redirect, to deflect before he dug too deep. "If you'll excuse me, sir, I need to finish the bedroom before my shift ends." I moved to step around him, but he blocked my path, not threateningly, just enough to keep me from escaping. The men who were just here, Carlo and Dominic, did you overhear their conversation? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment where I could nod, smile vaguely, and lie my way to safety. But those gray eyes held mine, and I found myself caught between self-preservation and a moral imperative I'd thought I'd buried 3 years ago. They said something about a schedule change, I heard myself say. Tonight instead of tomorrow. A warehouse at midnight. Rico's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between us, a sharpening of attention that made me feel simultaneously exposed and strangely protected. And this concerns you because... It doesn't, I said quickly. I shouldn't have been listening. I'm sorry, I'll just... Nina. My name was a command, stopping me mid-retreat. Why does it concern you? The weight of his stare was unbearable. I could feel the words building in my throat, the warning I had no business giving, the involvement I'd sworn to avoid. But I'd seen this before. I'd lived through the aftermath of betrayal, had watched trust turn to blood on a kitchen floor. Because, I whispered, my voice barely audible, I've seen this before. The way they positioned themselves away from you. The careful timing of their conversation when you were in the other room. The sudden change in plans. I met his eyes, seeing my own death reflected in the risk I was taking. Your guards are going to betray you, Mr. Marciano. Whatever is supposed to happen tomorrow, they're moving it to tonight, and I don't think you're meant to survive it. The silence that followed was absolute. Rico stared at me, his expression unreadable, while my pulse thundered in my ears. I'd just signed my death warrant. If he believed me and I was wrong, I was dead. If he didn't believe me and I was right, I was dead. And if he told anyone else what I'd said, I was definitely dead. Why would you tell me this? He asked finally, his voice soft and more dangerous than any shout. You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Yet you risk your life to warn me about a threat you claim to recognize. Why? Because I'd been 17 and helpless, watching my father die while men I'd trusted did nothing. Because I'd spent 3 years hating my own cowardice, my survival coming at the cost of my silence. Because this man, dangerous as he was, deserved to know that the people he'd trusted were planning to kill him. Because betrayal should never go unwarned, I said simply. Rico studied me for a long moment, and I could see him cataloging details, reassessing me with the same intensity he'd used to evaluate a business deal or a potential threat. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a new quality. Respect, perhaps, or the recognition of something he hadn't expected to find in a hotel maid. Come with me, he said, not a request. We need to talk somewhere private. I can't, I protested. My shift, Marco is no longer a concern. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. You're coming with me, Nina, because either you've just saved my life, or you're part of an elaborate trap. Either way, I need to know which. Terror and a strange sense of inevitability warred within me as he guided me toward the private elevator, his hand at the small of my back both possessive and protective. The doors closed, sealing us into the confined space, and I caught our reflection in the mirrored walls. Him, powerful and controlled in his tailored suit. Me, small and disheveled in my cheap uniform, my hand still resting protectively over the secret I carried. You're pregnant, he observed, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. Yes. The father? Gone, not coming back. He nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. Do you have family? Someone who would miss you if you disappeared? The question should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over my shoulders. No one. Good. The elevator began its descent, carrying us away from the safety of routine and into whatever came next. Then when this is over, assuming we both survive, you're going to tell me the real story. Who you are, what you're running from, and why a pregnant hotel maid can identify betrayal patterns that my own security team apparently missed. I should have argued, should have insisted on my right to return to my anonymous life, but we both knew that life was already gone, destroyed the moment I'd opened my mouth and warned him. Now I was either his salvation or his downfall, and the only way to discover which was to see this through to its inevitable, dangerous end. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Enrico's hand tightened slightly on my back, a subtle signal of possession and protection. Whatever came next, I was his now, his witness, his warning, his responsibility, and possibly, though neither of us knew it yet, his greatest vulnerability. The black SUV pulled away from the hotel with the smooth acceleration of expensive machinery. I sat in the back beside Rico, hyper-aware of the armed men in the front seats, the tinted windows that made the bright afternoon seem dim and ominous, the locked doors that meant I couldn't escape even if I wanted to. Which, surprisingly, I didn't. Not yet, anyway. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "Somewhere we can talk without being overheard," Rico replied, his attention fixed on his phone screen. His thumbs moved rapidly across the keyboard, sending messages to people I couldn't see. "Somewhere safe." The irony of seeking safety with a man whose business was anything but safe wasn't lost on me. But I'd committed to this course of action the moment I'd warned him, and there was no going back now. We drove through Manhattan's midday traffic, the city's familiar chaos visible through darkened glass. I watched pedestrians hurrying along sidewalks, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside this unmarked vehicle. Normal people living normal lives, something I'd once had and lost, something I'd never have again. My hand drifted to my stomach, a gesture that had become automatic over the past few weeks. The baby was barely the size of a plum, but already it had changed everything. Already it had made me vulnerable in ways I'd sworn I'd never be again. "How far along are you?" Rico asked, noticing the movement. 3 months. "And the father knows?" I laughed, a bitter sound. He knew I existed long enough to get what he wanted. After that, I was just another mistake he didn't want to deal with. Rico's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His loss. The unexpected defense caught me off guard. I looked at him properly for the first time since entering the car, really seeing him, rather than just reacting to the danger he represented. In the confined space, I could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of sandalwood and leather. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, revealing a crisp white shirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But it was his hands that drew my attention, broad and strong, with a small scar across the knuckles of his right hand. Working hands, despite the manicure and the expensive watch encircling his wrist. These were hands that had built an empire, that had defended it, that had undoubtedly done things I didn't want to imagine. "Tell me exactly what you observed," he said, shifting to face me more directly. Everything about Carlo and Dominic's conversation, their body language, their positioning, anything that seemed off. I closed my eyes, replaying the scene in my mind. This was familiar territory, the careful observation I'd trained myself to do automatically ever since that night 3 years ago. "They waited until you went into the bedroom," I began. That was deliberate. They'd been standing near the windows before, but they moved closer to the door, positioning themselves where they could see if you were coming back out. Carlo kept his hand near his jacket, where I assume he carries a weapon. Dominic was more relaxed physically, but his eyes kept darting to the hallway, checking for witnesses. What did they say exactly? Something about a schedule change, moving something from tomorrow to tonight. Dominic mentioned your name, Said you wanted everyone at the warehouse by midnight. But the way he said it. I paused, trying to articulate what my instincts had picked up. It was too casual, too certain, like he already knew you'd agree, or like it didn't matter whether you did. Rico nodded slowly, his expression grave. What else? The way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't paying attention. There was an understanding there, a shared knowledge. And when Carlo glanced at me, there was calculation in his eyes. He was measuring whether I was a threat, whether I'd overheard anything important. But you made yourself invisible, Rico observed. Yes, it's a skill I've perfected. Clearly not perfectly, since I noticed you. Heat crept up my neck. You're different. How? I wasn't sure how to answer that. How could I explain that while his security team had looked through me with the casual dismissal of those accustomed to hired help, Rico had actually seen me? That his attention had felt less like assessment and more like recognition, as if he'd identified something in me that matched something in himself. You pay attention, I said finally. Real attention, not just surveillance. There's a difference. A slight smile curved his lips, observant and philosophical. You're full of surprises, Nina Russo. The way he said my assumed name made me wonder if he suspected it was fake. But before I could worry about that, the SUV pulled into an underground parking garage, descending several levels below street access. The fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh white, the concrete walls bare and industrial. We stopped in a private section blocked off by additional security gates. 2 more men appeared from a guardhouse, both armed, both wearing earpieces. They recognized Rico immediately, stepping aside to let us pass into an elevator I hadn't noticed before. This is one of my properties, Rico explained as we rose swiftly upward. Completely secure, sweep for bugs every day, limited access. If there's anywhere we can talk freely, it's here. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that made the hotel suite look modest by comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but I barely registered the scenery. My focus was on the space itself, the minimalist furniture that screamed expensive designer, the artwork that I suspected was original rather than prints, the subtle security cameras positioned at strategic intervals. Sit, Rico invited, gesturing to a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car. Can I get you something? Water? Tea? You should eat something if you haven't had lunch. The consideration was unexpected and disarming. I perched on the edge of the sofa, my cheap uniform stark against the luxurious upholstery. Water is fine, thank you. He disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen, returning moments later with 2 bottles of mineral water and a plate of expensive-looking crackers and cheese. He placed them on the glass coffee table before taking the chair across from me, close enough for conversation, but far enough to avoid crowding. Now, he said, his voice taking on the tone of someone conducting serious business. I need you to understand the situation you've walked into. If what you're telling me is accurate, and my instincts say it is, then there's a conspiracy within my organization. A betrayal at a level I didn't think possible. I nodded, unscrewing the water bottle with trembling hands. Carlo and Dominic aren't just any guards, he continued. They're part of my inner circle. Men I've trusted with my life for years. Carlo has been with me for 8 years, Dominic for 6. They know everything about my operations, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Which makes them perfect for a coup, I said quietly. His eyes sharpened. You know something about this, about betrayal within organizations. It wasn't a question. I took a sip of water, buying time to decide how much to reveal. But I'd already committed to this path, and partial truth would only make things worse. My father was an accountant, I began, my voice steady despite the memories clawing at my throat. He worked for a businessman in our hometown, someone who seemed legitimate on the surface, but who was actually running a sophisticated money laundering operation. My father discovered it by accident, found discrepancies that didn't make sense. Rico leaned forward, his attention absolute. What did he do? He confronted his partner, a man he'd known for 15 years, his best friend. He thought loyalty mattered, that their friendship would protect the truth. I laughed bitterly. He was wrong. What happened? The water bottle crinkled in my grip. 3 men came to our house one night. People my father had trusted, had worked with, had considered friends. They shot him while I hid in the pantry. His partner, the best friend, he was there too. He watched. He didn't pull the trigger, but he might as well have. How old were you? 17. Silence stretched between us, heavy with understanding. Rico's expression had softened, not with pity, which I would have hated, but with a kind of recognition. He knew this kind of loss, this kind of betrayal. And you've been running ever since, he said. Yes. Changed my name, changed cities, made myself as unremarkable as possible. I got really good at watching for the signs, at recognizing when people were planning something they didn't want others to know about. I met his eyes. That's how I knew about Carlo and Dominic. I've seen that particular kind of conspiracy before. Rico stood, moving to the windows. The afternoon sun backlit his silhouette, making him seem larger, more imposing. There's something you need to know, Nina. If you're right about this, if there is a betrayal being planned, then you're now a target. They don't know yet that you've warned me, but eventually they'll figure it out, and when they do, they'll come for you. Fear slithered down my spine, but I'd known this from the moment I'd opened my mouth. I know. Which means you can't go back to your life. Your apartment, your job at the hotel, everything familiar. It's all compromised now. I understand. He turned to face me, his expression serious. Do you? Because this isn't temporary. Once you're in my world, once you're under my protection, there's no going back to being invisible. You'll be watched, monitored, protected, but also controlled. Your freedom will be limited for your own safety. The gilded cage, I thought. Luxury and security in exchange for autonomy. It should have terrified me, should have sent me running for the door. But I was pregnant, alone, and now marked for death by men who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a witness. What choice did I really have? What do you need from me? I asked instead. Rico returned to his chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I need you to tell me everything you remember about today. Every detail, no matter how small. Then, I need you to stay here, safe, while I figure out exactly how deep this betrayal goes and who else might be involved. And after that, we deal with the traitors. And you. He paused, something complex flickering across his features. You become part of my organization. Under my protection, but also under my authority. Can you accept that? I thought about my cramped apartment, my exhausting job, my uncertain future as a single mother. I thought about the baby growing inside me, deserving safety and security I couldn't provide alone. I thought about the alternative, running again, always looking over my shoulder, never knowing when my past would catch up. Yes, I said, I can accept that. Something like satisfaction crossed Rico's face. Good. Now, start from the beginning of your shift this morning. Tell me everything you saw, everyone you interacted with, any detail that seemed even slightly unusual. For the next hour, I walked him through my day with meticulous detail. He asked pointed questions, pushing me to remember things I didn't think I'd noticed. It was exhausting and oddly intimate, this detailed reconstruction of ordinary moments now weighted with sinister significance. As I talked, Rico took notes on his phone, occasionally stepping away to make calls in Italian, his voice low and urgent. I caught fragments, names I didn't recognize, instructions I couldn't fully understand. But I could hear the controlled anger beneath his calm exterior, the fury of a man who'd been betrayed by those he'd trusted most. "There's something else," I said when we'd covered the morning's events. "At the hotel there's a night manager, Vincent Calabrese. He's new, started about 6 months ago. He always seems to know when you're checking in, always personally handles your arrangements." Rico's eyes sharpened. "You think he's involved?" "I don't know, but he pays too much attention to your security detail, asks questions about their schedules that seem excessive even for a manager, and he has private conversations with Carlo that stop abruptly when other staff approach." "Vincent Calabrese," Rico repeated, typing the name into his phone. Within seconds, he was reading something, his expression darkening. "He's connected to the Messina family. Distant relation, but there. And the Messinas have been pushing into my territory for the past year." "So it's not just your men," I said, understanding dawning. "It's a coordinated move by a rival organization." "Appears so." He made another call, this one brief and clipped. When he ended it, he looked at me with new assessment. "You've just identified a connection my own intelligence people missed. Either you're remarkably observant, or you have training I don't know about." "Just survival instinct," I said. "When you've had to watch for threats every day for 3 years, you get good at seeing patterns." A knock at the door interrupted us. Rico stood smoothly, his hand moving to his waist, where I now noticed a gun holstered beneath his jacket. "Stay here," he commanded, moving toward the entrance. I heard muffled voices. Then Rico returned with another man, this one older, maybe in his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that held the same dangerous intelligence as Rico's. "Nina, this is Sal Torino, my consigliere. Sal, this is Nina Russo, the woman who just potentially saved my life." Sal's gaze swept over me with clinical assessment, taking in my uniform, my pregnant belly, my obvious discomfort. "The hotel maid," he said, his voice neutral but his eyes sharp. "The very observant hotel maid," Rico corrected. "Tell him what you told me." I repeated my observations, watching Sal's expression grow increasingly grave. When I finished, he exchanged a long look with Rico, some unspoken communication passing between them. "If this is accurate," Sal said slowly, "we have a serious problem. Carlo and Dominic have access to everything. Security codes, safe house locations, transportation routes. If they've turned, if they're working with the Messinas. Then we need to know who else is compromised," Rico finished. "And we need to know tonight, before whatever they're planning goes into motion." "I can make some calls," Sal offered. "Quietly, see who else might be involved. Do it, but carefully. We can't tip our hand until we know the full extent of the betrayal." Sal nodded, moving to a corner of the room to make his calls. Rico returned his attention to me, his expression softer than before. "You're going to stay here tonight," he said. "There's a guest room down the hall, fully stocked with everything you'll need. Tomorrow we'll arrange to collect your belongings from your apartment, but you're not going back there personally. It's not safe." "My things," I started, "will be brought to you, or replaced if necessary. Money isn't an issue." The casual dismissal of expense was jarring, a reminder of the vast gulf between our worlds. But I was too tired and overwhelmed to argue. "There's also a doctor I want you to see," Rico continued. "Someone discreet who can check on the baby, make sure everything is progressing normally. Stress isn't good for pregnancy." The concern in his voice surprised me. "Why do you care? About the baby, I mean. It's not yours." "Because you saved my life," he said simply. "That creates a debt, and I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours," I said automatically, even as part of me recognized the futility of the protest. His smile was knowing. You are now, Nina, whether you realize it yet or not. The moment you warned me, you became mine to protect. That's how this works. Before I could argue, Sal returned, his expression grim. I've confirmed that Dominic made several calls to a burner phone this morning. The number traces back to a location in Messina territory, and Carlo requested schedule changes for tonight's security detail that don't match any legitimate operational needs. So it's real, Rico said, his voice flat with controlled rage. My own men are planning to kill me. Appears so. The question is, do we confront them directly or set a trap? Rico was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice carried the cold calculation of a man making strategic decisions. We set a trap. If they think their plan is proceeding normally, they'll reveal everyone involved. But we need insurance, something they won't expect. His eyes returned to me, and I suddenly understood what he was thinking. No, I said immediately. Whatever you're planning, I'm not. You're the perfect unknown, he interrupted. They don't know you exist, don't know you've warned me, which means you can move through their plans invisibly, just like you've been doing for years. I'm a hotel maid, not a spy. You're a survivor who's spent 3 years learning to identify betrayal. That makes you exactly what I need. Sal looked between us, understanding dawning on his weathered face. You want to use her as an observer? Plant her where the traitors won't expect surveillance. Exactly. Absolutely not, I protested. I'm pregnant. I can't. You'll be perfectly safe, Rico assured me. You won't be in any physical danger. You'll simply be present, watching, like you always do. But this time, you'll be reporting what you see directly to me. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to insist that I'd done enough by warning him, that he couldn't ask more of me. But the truth was, I was already involved. Already a target if the traitors discovered my role. And if Rico's plan failed, if the betrayal succeeded, I'd be left alone and vulnerable with no protection at all. What exactly would I have to do? I heard myself ask. Rico's smile was triumphant, as if he'd known all along that I'd agree. Just be yourself. Watch, listen, and tell me what you see. Nothing more dangerous than what you've already been doing. As he outlined his plan, I felt the last remnants of my anonymous life slipping away like water through my fingers. By tomorrow, I would no longer be invisible Nina Russo, unremarkable hotel maid. I would be something new, something dangerous. I would be Rico Marciano's secret weapon. And God help me, part of me was terrified by how right that felt. The guest room Rico showed me to was larger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that felt like silk against my work-roughened hands. An ensuite bathroom offered a soaking tub, and a shower with more jets than I could count. The closet was stocked with women's clothing, all in my size, all expensive brands I'd only ever seen in magazine advertisements. How did you... I started, gesturing at the clothes. I have people who handle these things, Rico said dismissively, as if maintaining a wardrobe for unexpected female guests was perfectly normal. Everything should fit. But if it doesn't, let Sal know, and he'll arrange replacements. He paused at the door, his hand resting on the frame in a gesture that seemed almost uncertain. It was the first time I'd seen him display anything less than complete confidence, and it made him seem more human somehow. Nina, he said, my false name sounding strange in his mouth, now that he knew more of my truth. What you did today, warning me, that took courage, real courage. I want you to know I don't take it lightly. I just did what anyone would do, I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. Most people would have stayed silent, protected themselves first. No, he corrected gently. You did what you wished someone had done for your father. That's different. That's choosing to break your own rules to prevent someone else's tragedy. The accuracy of his observations stole my breath. He saw too much, this dangerous man with storm-gray eyes. Get some rest, he continued. Tomorrow will be complicated. We'll need you sharp and ready. After he left, I stood in the center of the room, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning I'd been a nobody, scrubbing toilets and dodging my landlord's calls about late rent. Now I was standing in a luxury penthouse, wearing borrowed clothes, preparing to help a Mafia boss identify traitors within his organization. And I was pregnant. I couldn't forget that crucial detail, even though everything else seemed surreal. My hand moved to my stomach automatically, a gesture that had become habitual. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the tiny life inside me. "I wanted better for you, safer. But we work with what we have, right?" The baby, of course, didn't answer, but I felt a strange sense of determination settling over me. Whatever else happened, I would survive this. I would protect this child. I would find a way to build something better from these dangerous circumstances. I showered, letting hot water wash away the grime and exhaustion of my shift. The toiletries provided were expensive, scented with lavender and vanilla, so different from the harsh soap I usually used. As I dried off with towels softer than any I'd ever owned, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked different. Not physically, not yet, though my body was beginning to change in subtle ways. But there was something in my eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there this morning. The last remnants of the girl I'd been at 17 were fading, replaced by a woman who'd warned a dangerous man about betrayal and lived to tell the tale. I dressed in a simple nightgown from the closet, soft cotton that didn't cling uncomfortably to my changing body. The bed was as comfortable as it looked, and despite my racing thoughts, exhaustion pulled me under within minutes. I woke to darkness and the sound of raised voices somewhere in the penthouse. My heart hammering, I crept to the door, opening it a crack to listen. "Can't trust her." That was Sal's voice, angry and insistent. "She appears out of nowhere with this convenient warning. It's too perfect. She could be the distraction while the real attack comes from another direction. She's not part of this." Rico's voice was calm, but firm. "I'd stake my life on it. You are staking your life on it, and not just yours, the entire organization's. If she's playing us, if she's working with the Messinas, she's not." The absolute certainty in Rico's tone silenced Sal's protests. "I've spent the last 3 hours having her background checked. Nina Russo doesn't exist, which means she's using a false name, just like she admitted. But the woman she likely is? She fits perfectly with the story she told me. Father murdered 3 years ago in a small town upstate. Daughter disappeared immediately after. No criminal record, no connections to any families, nothing to suggest she's anything other than what she claims to be." There was a pause, then Sal's voice, quieter now. "You like her." "I respect her. There's a difference." "Is there?" Sal's tone was knowing, almost amused. "Rico, you've had beautiful women throw themselves at you for years, and you barely notice them. This one shows up pregnant and terrified, warns you about a conspiracy, and suddenly you're rearranging your security protocols to accommodate her observations. She saved my life. Maybe. Or maybe she's playing a longer game than we understand. Then we'll discover that when we spring the trap tonight. Either way, she stays under my protection until we know for certain." Their voices faded as they moved to another part of the penthouse. I retreated back into the guest room, my mind whirling. Rico had investigated me, discovered my real identity, yet he still trusted me, still wanted to protect me. Why? I couldn't sleep after that. Instead, I stood at the windows, watching the city lights glitter in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were planning to kill the man who'd offered me protection. And somehow, I'd become entangled in a web of conspiracy and violence that reminded me too much of the night my father died. A soft knock at my door made me jump. "Nina? It's me. Can I come in?" Rico's voice, respectful even in the middle of the night. I opened the door to find him still fully dressed, though he'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. He looked tired, lines of stress visible around his eyes. "I heard voices," I admitted. "Sal doesn't trust me. Sal doesn't trust anyone except me, and sometimes I think he's skeptical about that too. It's what makes him good at his job." Rico stepped into the room, maintaining a respectful distance. "But he'll come around, especially after tonight, when your information proves accurate. And if it doesn't, if I'm wrong about Carlo and Dominic, then we'll deal with that too. But you're not wrong, Nina. I've known those men for years, and now that you've pointed it out, I can see the signs I've been missing. The small changes in behavior, the requests that didn't quite make sense. You didn't create this conspiracy. You just helped me see it." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the room's perfect climate control. I keep thinking about my father, how he trusted his friend, how he believed loyalty meant something, and that faith killed him. Rico moved closer, his presence radiating warmth and something else, a protective energy that both comforted and unsettled me. "Your father wasn't wrong to believe in loyalty. He was just wrong about who deserved his trust. There's a difference." "Is there? How do you know who to trust in your world, where betrayal is just business?" His smile was sad. "You don't. Not completely. You make educated guesses. You test loyalty. You watch for signs. But in the end, you accept that anyone could turn, given the right motivation or pressure. And you prepare for that possibility." "That sounds exhausting." "It is, but it's also survival." He studied me in the darkness, the city lights behind me casting shadows across his face. "You understand that better than most. You've been doing your own version of it for 3 years. I just wanted to disappear, to be invisible, safe. But you couldn't quite manage it, could you? Because fundamentally you're not someone who can ignore injustice, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs you your safety." His voice softened. "That's why you warned me. Not because you owe me anything, but because you couldn't watch another person get betrayed without trying to prevent it." The accuracy of his insight made my throat tight. "Maybe I'm just stupid. Maybe you're brave. There's a difference there too." We stood in comfortable silence, an understanding passing between us that didn't require words. Two people marked by betrayal, learning to navigate a world where trust was currency and loyalty was often an illusion. "The baby's father," Rico said eventually, his tone carefully neutral. "You said he left. Was there more to that story?" I hesitated, then decided that if I was trusting this man with my life, I could trust him with this truth too. He was someone I met after I ran. I was lonely, scared, trying to build a new life. He was charming, attentive, everything I needed at that moment. I thought maybe I could have something normal, something good. But he wasn't who he claimed to be. No. When I told him I was pregnant, his mask slipped. Turned out he was married, had 2 other kids, had been lying about everything from the start. He called me a mistake. Said if I ever contacted him again, he'd make sure I regretted it. I laughed bitterly. So I learned that lesson too. Trust is dangerous. Believing in people gets you hurt. Rico's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing beneath the skin. He threatened you? In a way that made it clear he meant it. So I disappeared from his life before he could make good on that threat. His name. It wasn't a question. I looked up at Rico, seeing something cold and dangerous in his eyes. The reminder that this man was not my friend, not my protector out of kindness, but someone who operated in a world of violence and retribution. "Why?" I asked. "Because no one threatens what's mine, not without consequences." "I'm not," I started, but he cut me off with a look. "You are, whether you accept it yet or not. And that means anyone who's hurt you, threatened you, made you afraid, they answer to me now." The possessiveness should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest, dangerous and seductive. For 3 years, I'd been alone, protecting myself, fighting my own battles. The idea of someone else standing between me and the world was intoxicating. "His name was Derek Morrison," I heard myself say. "He works in finance, lives in Connecticut with his real family." Rico pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "Consider him handled." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing dramatic. Just ensure he understands that you're under my protection now, and that any further contact or threats will be met with consequences he doesn't want to experience." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You won't hear from him again." I should have objected to the casual threat, the assumption that violence was an acceptable response. But I was too tired, too overwhelmed, and yes, too grateful that someone was willing to defend me. "Thank you," I whispered. Rico stepped closer, his hand rising to cup my face with unexpected gentleness. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the touch sending shivers down my spine. "You're not alone anymore, Nina. Whatever name you're using, whoever you really are, you're under my protection now. That means something. It means you're safe." "Nothing about this is safe," I said, but I didn't pull away from his touch. "Maybe not, but it's safer than being alone and vulnerable. And I promise you this, no one will hurt you or your baby while I'm alive. That's a vow." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression hardening. "It's time. The plan is in motion." Fear and anticipation twisted in my stomach. "What do you need me to do?" "Exactly what we discussed. Watch, observe, and report. Nothing more." He stepped back, his hand falling away from my face, leaving me oddly bereft. "Sal will brief you on the specifics. But Nina, if at any point you feel unsafe, if anything seems wrong, you get out. Understood?" "Understood." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. After tonight, after we deal with the traitors, we're going to have a longer conversation about your future, about what you want, what you need, what I can offer. Because this arrangement, this protection, it's permanent. You need to understand that." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of his promise and the terrifying realization that my life had fundamentally changed in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. I was no longer invisible Nina Russo, anonymous hotel maid. I was something new, something dangerous. I was Rico Marciano's protected asset, his secret observer, his responsibility. And whether I was ready or not, tonight would determine whether that new identity was my salvation or my doom. Sal arrived at my room 30 minutes later, carrying a small bag and wearing an expression that suggested he'd accepted my presence, if not entirely trusted it. "We need to prepare you," he said, without preamble, setting the bag on the bed. "You're going to wear this." He pulled out what looked like a simple necklace, a delicate silver chain with a small pendant. "It's a listening device and GPS tracker. If anything goes wrong, we'll know exactly where you are." I took the necklace, examining the pendant. It looked ordinary enough, the kind of jewelry a working-class woman might wear. And what exactly am I listening for? Names, locations, anyone who's mentioned as part of the conspiracy. Carlo and Dominic don't know you exist, which means they won't guard their words around you. You'll be invisible, just like always. Except this time, we'll hear everything you do. He pulled out another item, a small smartphone. This is yours now. It has one contact programmed in, me. If you need immediate extraction, you press and hold the power button for 3 seconds. We'll come for you, no matter where you are. The weight of what I was about to do settled over me like a physical burden. Where exactly am I going? The warehouse where the meeting is supposed to take place. Rico's going to show up as expected, as if he knows nothing about the conspiracy. You'll already be there, positioned as a worker, someone forgettable. You'll listen to the conversations happening around you, particularly any discussion between Carlo, Dominic, and whoever else arrives early. And if they recognize me from the hotel? They won't. You were invisible then, remember? Just another face in the background. Besides, we're changing your appearance enough that even if they glanced at you twice, they wouldn't connect you to the maid from this morning. He pulled out hair dye, cheap clothing, and glasses with clear lenses. You're going to look like every other warehouse worker in the city. Forgettable, unremarkable, beneath notice. An hour later, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. My naturally light brown hair was now a mousy dark blonde, pulled back in a severe ponytail. The glasses changed the shape of my face, and the loose, unflattering clothing hid both my figure and my pregnancy. I looked tired, worn down, exactly like someone working a night shift at a warehouse for minimum wage. Perfect, Sal said, examining his work with professional satisfaction. You could walk past your own mother, and she wouldn't recognize you. The comment stung more than he knew. My mother had died when I was 12, leaving me and my father to navigate life together. Now he was gone too, and I was truly alone in the world. Except I wasn't. Not anymore. I was under Rico Marciano's protection, which came with its own complications and dangers. Let's go over the plan one more time, Sal said, pulling out a tablet and showing me a map of the warehouse. You'll be positioned here, in the sorting area. It gives you a good vantage point to observe the main floor without being obvious. Your job is to inventory supplies, which gives you a reason to be moving around if needed. He pulled up photos of several men I didn't recognize. These are people we suspect might be involved. If you see any of them arrive, particularly if they're meeting with Carlo or Dominic before Rico gets there, note it. Note everything they say, everyone they interact with. And when Rico arrives, you stay in position, continue your work. The confrontation, if there is one, will happen in the office area. He pointed to a section of the map. You won't be anywhere near it, but we need to know who was involved, who knew about the plan, who we can trust and who we can't. I studied the faces on the screen, committing them to memory. How long do I have to stay there? As long as it takes to identify everyone involved. Could be an hour, could be 3. But the moment things turn dangerous, you leave through the service exit here. He zoomed in on an unmarked door. A car will be waiting for you there at all times. Driver knows to get you out if you show up. And Rico? What's his plan? Sal's expression grew harder. Rico's plan is to survive the night and eliminate the threat to his organization. How he does that isn't something you need to know. The dismissal was clear, but I pressed anyway. He's going to kill them, isn't he? Carlo and Dominic, anyone else involved. He's going to do what's necessary to protect himself and everyone loyal to him. In our world, betrayal has only one consequence. Sal met my eyes squarely. If that bothers you, now's the time to say so. Because once you're part of this, once you help us identify the traitors, you're complicit in whatever happens to them. Was I bothered? I thought about my father, about the men who'd betrayed him, who'd shot him while his best friend watched. If I'd had the power then, would I have wanted justice? Revenge? Yes. Absolutely yes. I understand, I said quietly. I'm ready. The warehouse was exactly as bleak as I'd imagined. Concrete floors, metal shelving reaching toward high ceilings, fluorescent lights that cast everything in harsh white. The night shift was sparse, just a few workers moving through their tasks with the mechanical efficiency of those who'd done this 1,000 times before. I reported to the shift supervisor, a tired-looking man who barely glanced at my forged paperwork before assigning me to inventory. The necklace Sal had given me sat cold against my skin, a constant reminder that I was being monitored, protected, used. I'd been working for about 20 minutes when Carlo arrived. I recognized him immediately despite maintaining my focus on the clipboard in my hands. He moved with the confidence of someone who belonged here, greeting the supervisor by name, heading toward the office area without hesitation. 10 minutes later, Dominic followed, and with him, 2 other men I recognized from the photos Sal had shown me. They didn't acknowledge the workers, treating us as invisible obstacles to navigate around. Good. That meant my disguise was working. I positioned myself closer to where they were gathering, using my clipboard as cover while I strained to hear their conversation. The listening device would pick up more than I could, but I wanted to understand what was happening in real time. Sure he's coming? That was one of the men from the photos, voice tense with anxiety. He confirmed it himself. Carlo's voice calm and certain. Changed his schedule like we knew he would. He'll be here in 20 minutes. And the Messinas? Already in position. The moment Rico steps out of his car, they move in. Quick, clean, over before his other guards can react. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a betrayal within the organization. This was a coordinated hit, an assassination planned in detail. What about witnesses? Dominic asked. The workers? Handled. Shift supervisor is one of ours. Everyone else here tonight is expendable. Anyone who sees too much doesn't leave this warehouse. I forced myself to keep breathing normally, to maintain my posture of bored indifference. But inside, panic clawed at my throat. They were planning to kill everyone here who might identify them. That included me. I casually moved closer to the service exit Sal had showed me, still maintaining the pretense of counting inventory, but I kept the door in my peripheral vision, calculating how quickly I could reach it if necessary. Angelo's confirmed he'll handle the transition, Carlo continued. With Rico gone, he becomes head of the family. We get promoted to his inner circle. The Messinas get their territory expansion. Everyone wins. Angelo, another name to file away, another piece of the conspiracy. A hand suddenly gripped my shoulder, and I nearly screamed. I turned to find the shift supervisor looking at me with suspicious eyes. You're new, he said, his tone making it an accusation rather than an observation. Started last week, I lied smoothly, holding up my clipboard. Just doing inventory like you assigned. He studied me for a long moment, and I could feel sweat forming at my hairline despite the warehouse's chill. Then he nodded curtly. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. Might be some activity tonight that's none of your business. Yes, sir. He walked away, but I could feel his attention on me periodically. He was watching me now, suspicious of something, though I couldn't imagine what had triggered his caution. I needed to warn Rico. The assassination attempt wasn't going to happen inside the warehouse. It was planned for the parking lot. The moment he arrived, he'd be walking into an ambush. But I couldn't use the phone Sal had given me, not while the supervisor was watching. And I couldn't leave without drawing attention to myself, confirming whatever suspicions were forming in his mind. I was trapped, holding information that could save Rico's life, but unable to communicate it. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Carlo and Dominic moved to the office area, their conversation dropping to whispers I couldn't hear even with the listening device. The other workers continued their tasks, oblivious to the violence being planned around them. Then, through the high windows near the warehouse ceiling, I saw headlights approaching, a convoy of vehicles, moving with the careful precision of a professional security detail. Rico was here, and he was driving straight into a kill zone. I made a split-second decision. Dropping my clipboard, I moved quickly toward the office area, my hand reaching for the phone in my pocket. I had to warn him, had to get the message through before... The supervisor blocked my path, his hand moving to his waist, where I now saw he carried a gun. "Where do you think you're going?" "Bathroom," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. "I need to..." Nobody leaves the floor. His eyes were cold, certain. "Not until after our guests arrive." I was out of time. Rico would be walking through those doors in seconds, and I was standing here helpless, just like I'd been helpless in my kitchen pantry while my father died. No, not again. Not this time. I'd spent 3 years running from confrontation, hiding from danger, making myself invisible. But invisibility had its own power, its own weapons. I'd learned that this morning when I'd warned Rico, despite every instinct screaming at me to stay silent. "There's a problem with the inventory," I said, loud enough for my voice to carry to where Carlo and Dominic stood. "Some of the shipments don't match the manifests." The supervisor's eyes widened in alarm. "Shut up." But I kept talking, raising my voice further. "Looks like someone's been skimming. There's at least $20,000 worth of merchandise unaccounted for." It was a wild gambit, a desperate attempt to create chaos and delay whatever was about to happen. And for a crucial moment, it worked. Carlo and Dominic turned toward me, confusion and anger warring on their faces. The supervisor grabbed my arm, trying to silence me, but I pulled away, stumbling backward toward the main floor. And that's when Rico walked through the door, not alone and exposed as the conspirators had planned, but surrounded by at least a dozen armed men who fanned out with military precision. His eyes found mine across the warehouse, and I saw understanding flash in those gray depths. He'd heard everything through the listening device, knew about the ambush, had changed his approach accordingly. The supervisor released me, reaching for his gun, but he never cleared leather. One of Rico's men put him down with a single shot, the sound echoing through the warehouse like a cannon blast. Then, all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions simultaneously. The few legitimate workers on the floor dropped to the ground, screaming, while I scrambled toward the nearest metal shelving unit, using it as cover. My hands instinctively moved to protect my stomach as bullets sparked off metal and concrete around me. Through gaps in the shelving, I saw Rico moving with controlled precision, directing his men with hand signals while they engaged the shooters who'd been hiding in the warehouse's upper levels. The Messina assassins, I realized. They'd been waiting in sniper positions, ready to kill Rico the moment he entered. But they'd expected him to be exposed, vulnerable. Instead, he'd come prepared, his own counter-ambush catching them off guard. Carlo and Dominic had drawn their weapons, but they were caught in a crossfire, unable to reach Rico or escape the warehouse. I watched as Dominic took a round to the shoulder, spinning him around before he dropped behind a forklift. "Cease fire." Rico's voice cut through the chaos, authoritative and commanding. "Messina shooters are neutralized. Secure the traitors." The gunfire stopped as abruptly as it had begun, leaving only the ringing silence of aftermath and the moans of the wounded. Rico's men moved through the warehouse with professional efficiency, zip-tying anyone who'd been involved in the conspiracy. I remained frozen behind the shelving, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This was violence on a scale I'd only imagined, surgical and brutal. "Nina," Rico's voice closer now. "It's safe. You can come out." I emerged on shaking legs, my hand still protectively cradling my stomach. Rico appeared around the shelving unit, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder but otherwise unharmed. His eyes swept over me with clinical assessment. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "Good." He turned to one of his men. "Get her to the safe car. Now. No. The word burst from my lips before I could think better of it. I need to see this through. I need to understand what happens next. Rico's expression hardened. What happens next isn't something you should witness. I already witnessed my father's murder. I think I can handle watching justice being served. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of my stubborn determination. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Stay close to me. Don't speak unless I ask you a direct question. Understood? Understood. He led me toward where Carlo and Dominic had been secured, their hands zip-tied behind their backs, forced to their knees in the center of the warehouse floor. Blood seeped from Dominic's shoulder wound, but his eyes burned with defiance. Sal appeared from the office area, his expression grim. Found the Messina contact information, text messages coordinating the hit, payment details, everything. And there's more. Angelo's been embezzling from the organization for months. This wasn't just about a power grab. He's been bleeding us dry to fund his own operation. Angelo, Rico repeated, the name cold on his tongue. My own cousin, blood family. He's not here, Sal continued, probably waiting at a safe distance to hear confirmation of your death. Rico pulled out his phone, dialing a number from memory. When it connected, he put it on speaker. Rico. Angelo's voice, tinged with false concern. I just heard there was trouble at the warehouse. Are you all right? I'm fine, Angelo. Thanks to some unexpected intelligence about Carlo and Dominic's betrayal. Silence on the other end, stretching long enough to confirm guilt. I don't know what you mean, Angelo finally said, but the slight tremor in his voice betrayed him. Don't you? Because I have them both here, along with their Messina contacts and complete records of your embezzlement. So let's not pretend you didn't orchestrate this entire operation. Rico, listen. I can explain. There's nothing to explain. You betrayed your family. You chose money over blood. And now you're going to face the consequences. You can't touch me. I have protection, allies. You move against me and what? Rico's voice was deadly calm. You'll have me killed? You already tried that, cousin. It didn't work out well for you. He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Then he turned his attention to Carlo and Dominic, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. How long? He asked. How long have you been planning this? Carlo met his gaze with something like defiance. Long enough. You've gotten soft, Rico. Sentimental. This organization needs strength, not weakness. And you thought Angelo provided that strength? Angelo understood that power requires ruthlessness. You've been too concerned with legitimacy, with going soft. The old ways are dying, and you're dying with them. Rico crouched down, bringing himself to Carlo's eye level. The old ways? Is that what you call loyalty? Honor? Treating my people with respect, rather than as expendable assets? Sentiment is weakness in our business, Dominic interjected, his voice strained with pain. We chose the winning side. Or we thought we did. You chose betrayal, Rico corrected. And in doing so, you've condemned not just yourselves, but everyone who followed you. The Messina shooters, the shift supervisor, all the men who participated in this conspiracy. They're all dead or dying because you convinced them to bet against me. He stood, turning to Sal. How many of our people were involved? At least 12 that we've identified. All of them recruited by Carlo and Dominic over the past 6 months. They promised promotions, more money, a bigger piece of the operation under Angelo's leadership. 12. Rico's voice was hollow. 12 men I trusted, who I fed, whose families I protected, all willing to kill me for a promise of more. He was silent for a long moment, and I could see the weight of betrayal settling over him like a physical burden. This wasn't just about business or power. These were people he'd considered family, and they'd chosen greed over loyalty. "There's a protocol for this," he said finally. "A process that's been followed in my family for generations when betrayal occurs. Sal knows what needs to be done." Sal nodded grimly. "I'll handle it personally." "No." Rico's voice was firm. "I'll do it myself. They betrayed me directly. The responsibility for justice is mine." I realized with creeping horror what he was saying. He was going to execute them, here and now, personally. The clinical violence I'd witnessed during the firefight was about to become intimate and deliberate. I should have looked away, should have accepted his earlier offer to leave. But I forced myself to watch, to witness the consequences of betrayal in this world I'd stumbled into. Rico drew his weapon, a sleek black pistol that looked almost delicate in his large hand. He approached Carlo first, the barrel pointed at the traitor's head. "Any last words?" Carlo spat at Rico's feet. "Go to hell." The gunshot was louder than I expected, echoing through the warehouse like thunder. Carlo's body slumped to the ground, and I felt my stomach lurch, bile rising in my throat. Rico moved to Dominic, who had gone pale, all defiance draining from his expression. "Please," Dominic whispered. "Please, I have a family, kids. They need... You should have thought about them before you betrayed me." Rico's voice was cold, emotionless. "Before you decided their security was worth less than Angelo's promises." The second shot was no easier to witness than the first. Rico holstered his weapon, turning to face his assembled men. "Let this be a lesson. Betrayal in this organization has one consequence. Loyalty is rewarded. Treachery is punished. There is no middle ground." The men nodded, their expressions a mixture of respect and fear. This was the reality of Rico's world, where violence was both currency and consequence. He turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not satisfaction or triumph, but a deep weariness, the cost of maintaining power through fear. "Now you see what I am," he said quietly. "Who I have to be to survive in this world. If you want to leave, if you want out of this arrangement, I'll provide you with money and protection to start over somewhere far from here. No strings attached." It was a genuine offer, I realized. Despite everything, despite claiming I was his to protect, he was giving me a choice, an exit from the violence and danger that defined his life. I looked at the bodies on the warehouse floor, at the blood pooling beneath them. I thought about my father, about how different his death might have been if someone had been there to defend him, to deliver justice to his betrayers. I thought about the baby growing inside me, about what kind of life I could provide alone versus what Rico was offering. Safety, security, protection from a world that had already proven dangerous. And I thought about the strange connection I felt to this man, this dangerous criminal who had somehow become the only person who truly saw me, who recognized my value beyond my ability to clean floors and remain invisible. "I'm not leaving," I heard myself say. "I made my choice when I warned you this morning. I'm staying." Something shifted in Rico's expression, relief and satisfaction, and something deeper, something almost tender. "You understand what that means? What staying entails?" "I understand that your world is violent, that betrayal is met with death, that loyalty is everything." I met his eyes steadily. "I understand that I'll never be normal again, never be invisible again, and I'm choosing it anyway." He stepped closer, his hand rising to cup my face with unexpected gentleness. "Then you're mine, completely, under my protection and under my authority. No more running, no more hiding. You're part of this family now, with all the safety and danger that entails." "I know." And the baby? His hand dropped to rest lightly on my stomach. I'll protect your child as if it were my own. No one will touch either of you while I draw breath. Tears pricked my eyes, unbidden and unwelcome. 3 years of isolation, of fighting alone, of carrying every burden by myself, and suddenly someone was offering to shoulder it with me. Why? I whispered. Why do you care? I'm just a pregnant hotel maid who happened to overhear a conspiracy. No, he corrected softly. You're a woman who risked everything to save a stranger, who showed more loyalty in one moment than men I'd known for years, who sees betrayal because you've lived through it and refuses to let it happen again without warning. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're exactly the kind of person I want in my organization, in my life. Before I could respond, Sal approached, clearing his throat diplomatically. Boss, we need to deal with Angelo. He's going to run the moment he realizes the coup failed. Rico's expression hardened, the momentary softness disappearing behind the mask of authority. Find him. Bring him to the estate. I'll handle my cousin personally. As Sal moved away to coordinate the search, Rico turned back to me. You should rest. This has been a long night, and stress isn't good for the baby. What will you do to Angelo? What needs to be done? Family or not, he orchestrated my assassination. There's only one response to that. Will you let me watch? The question surprised him. Why would you want to? Because I need to understand your world completely. No illusions, no protected innocence. If I'm staying, if I'm choosing this life, I need to see all of it. Rico studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But afterward, we're going to have a serious discussion about your role here, about what I expect from you and what you can expect from me. Agreed. As we left the warehouse, stepping over bodies and blood, I felt the last remnants of my old life slipping away. Nina Russo, invisible hotel maid, was gone forever. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who belonged to Rico Marciano's dangerous world. And God help me, I was ready for it. The sun was rising by the time we returned to Rico's penthouse, painting the city in shades of gold and pink that seemed obscene after the violence of the night. I sat in the back of the SUV, my clothes still marked with concrete dust from when I'd thrown myself to the ground during the firefight, my hands trembling with delayed shock. Rico sat beside me, making calls in Italian, coordinating the cleanup operation and the search for Angelo. His voice was calm, professional, as if he hadn't just executed 2 men in cold blood, as if this was just another business transaction requiring his attention. Maybe, in his world, it was. Sal met us at the penthouse, his expression grave. Angelo's in the wind. Left his apartment hours ago, cleared out his safe deposit box. He knew the plan would either work perfectly or fail spectacularly. He has family in Sicily, Rico said. He'll run there, thinking old connections will protect him. Want me to make arrangements? We have people who can handle it quietly. No. Rico's voice was firm. I'll go myself. This is family business. It requires a personal touch. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Which means I'll be leaving for a few days. You'll stay here, under Sal's protection. The doctor will come this afternoon to check on you and the baby. Everything you need will be provided. I want to come with you, I said, surprising myself with the boldness of the request. Both men stared at me. Absolutely not, Rico said. It's too dangerous. You're pregnant and I'm part of your organization now, aren't I? That's what you said. Which means I should understand all aspects of your business, including how you handle family betrayals. Sal made a sound that might have been amusement. She's got a point, boss. You did claim her as yours. In our world, that means she's entitled to witness justice being served. Rico's jaw tightened. This isn't a spectator sport, Nina. What I'm going to do to Angelo, it won't be quick or clean. It will be brutal, because it needs to send a message to anyone else thinking about betrayal. I know, and I still want to be there. He searched my face, looking for weakness or hesitation. Finding none, he sighed. Why? Why put yourself through this? Because my father's betrayers got away with it. They killed him and walked away without consequences. I need to see that justice actually happens sometimes, that betrayal doesn't always win. Understanding dawned in his eyes. This isn't about Angelo. It's about closure for what happened to your father. Maybe. Or maybe it's about fully committing to this new life. No half measures, no protected innocence. I'm choosing your world, Rico. All of it. He was silent for a long moment, then nodded once. All right, but you follow my rules completely. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Understood? Understood. Sal shook his head. You're both crazy, but I'll make arrangements for her to travel with us. We leave tonight. The day passed in a blur of preparation. The doctor came as promised, a discreet woman who checked on the baby and declared everything progressing normally despite the stress I'd been under. She left me with prenatal vitamins and strict instructions to rest. Rest seemed impossible. My mind kept replaying the events at the warehouse, the gunfire, the executions, the casual efficiency with which Rico had eliminated the threat to his organization. I should have been horrified. Should have been questioning my decision to stay in this world. Instead, I felt a strange sense of rightness, as if I'd finally found where I belonged. That evening, dressed in expensive clothes Rico had provided, I boarded a private jet for the first time in my life. The interior was luxurious beyond anything I'd imagined. All leather and polished wood and attentive staff who treated me with the same deference they showed Rico. Get some sleep, Rico advised as we took off. It's a long flight, and you'll need your strength for what comes next. I tried to sleep, but adrenaline and anticipation kept me awake. Instead, I watched the clouds slide past the window while Rico worked on his laptop, handling business even at 30,000 feet. Tell me about Angelo, I said eventually. What was he like before the betrayal? Rico looked up from his screen, considering the question. Ambitious. Smart. Always felt he deserved more than he had. My father made me his heir instead of Angelo, and I don't think he ever forgave that choice. Why did your father choose you? Because I understood that our business required balance. Strength, yes, but also restraint. The ability to inspire loyalty rather than just fear. Angelo only understood power through domination. He would have destroyed the organization within a year. And now he's destroyed himself instead. Yes. Rico's expression was bleak. Family should mean something. Loyalty should mean something. But he chose greed over blood. I thought about my own father, about how his trust and friendship had gotten him killed. Sometimes the people closest to us are the most dangerous. Is that why you've stayed alone for 3 years? Why you made yourself invisible? Partly. It's hard to trust anyone when you've seen how easily loyalty can be bought or broken. And yet, you trust me. Did I? I examined the question honestly. I trust that you protect what's yours. I trust that you value loyalty and punish betrayal. I trust that you meant it when you said you'd keep me and the baby safe. But you don't trust that I won't betray you eventually. The insight was uncomfortably accurate. Everyone betrays eventually, given the right circumstances. Not everyone, Rico said quietly. I've had people in my organization for 20 years who've never wavered. Sal, for instance. He's had a dozen opportunities to take over or sell me out, and he's never even considered it. Why not? Because I've earned his loyalty. Not through fear or money, but through consistent action. I protect my people. I reward faithfulness. I create an environment where loyalty is more valuable than betrayal. And when that fails, like with Carlo and Dominic, then I eliminate the threat and move on. But I don't let their betrayal poison my ability to trust those who've proven themselves worthy. It was a lesson I needed to learn, I realized. Trust wasn't all or nothing. It was earned gradually, proven over time, and yes, sometimes broken. But that didn't mean it was meaningless. We landed in Sicily as dawn was breaking, the landscape beautiful and ancient in the early light. Another car was waiting, this one armored and driven by local associates who greeted Rico with the respect bordering on reverence. Angelo's hiding at his grandmother's villa, Sal reported as we drove through winding roads. He thinks family property will protect him, that we wouldn't dare violate that sanctuary. He's wrong, Rico said flatly. Blood means nothing when it's used to justify betrayal. The villa was beautiful, perched on a hillside overlooking the Mediterranean. Under different circumstances, I would have appreciated the view. Now, I could only focus on what was about to happen. Rico's men moved with military precision, surrounding the property and cutting off any escape routes. There was no firefight this time, no dramatic confrontation. Angelo was found hiding in the wine cellar, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. They brought him to the main living area, forcing him to his knees in front of Rico. I stood to the side, an observer to this family drama, my presence unexpected and unsettling to Angelo. "Who is she?" he demanded, looking at me with confusion and contempt. "Why is there a pregnant woman here?" "She's the reason you failed," Rico replied calmly. "She overheard Carlo and Dominic planning your coup and warned me. She saved my life while you were planning to take it." Angelo's face contorted with rage. "A hotel maid? My entire operation was ruined by a hotel maid?" "Her occupation is irrelevant. Her loyalty is what mattered, something you clearly don't understand." "Loyalty?" Angelo spat. "You talk about loyalty while you steal my birthright. My father was the older brother. The organization should have been mine. Your father was also a violent drunk who nearly destroyed everything my father built. That's why he was passed over. That's why I was chosen instead." "Lies. All lies to justify your theft." Rico shook his head, more sad than angry. "Even now, facing death, you can't accept responsibility for your choices. You embezzled from the family business. You conspired with our enemies. You ordered my assassination. These aren't lies, Angelo. These are documented facts. I deserved more. I earned more." "You earned nothing but this." Rico gestured to their surroundings, to the men with guns, to the inevitability of what came next. "You betrayed family for greed. Now you pay the price." Angelo's bluster finally crumbled, fear replacing anger. "Please, Rico, we're blood, cousins. Doesn't that mean something?" "It meant everything, until you decided money was worth more than family." Rico pulled out his weapon, and I braced myself for another execution. But this time was different. This time, Rico's hand trembled slightly, the cost of killing family visible in ways it hadn't been with Carlo and Dominic. "Nina?" he said quietly, not looking away from Angelo. "Last chance to leave. You don't need to see this." I thought about my father, about the men who'd betrayed him, about the closure I'd never gotten. "I'm staying." The shot, when it came, was final and absolute. Angelo's body crumpled, blood pooling on the ancient stone floor, and with it, the last tie to a betrayal that had threatened everything Rico had built. But I saw the cost in Rico's expression, the weight of familial killing heavy on his shoulders. This wasn't the casual execution of wayward employees. This was the elimination of blood, of family, of someone who should have stood beside him but chose to stab him in the back instead. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. Sal, arrange the cleanup. Make sure the family understands why this was necessary. Sal nodded, already coordinating with the local team. Rico holstered his weapon and turned to me, his expression raw in a way I'd never seen before. Are you satisfied? He asked, almost accusatory. Did you get your closure? I stepped closer, looking up into his storm-gray eyes. I didn't need closure for me. I needed to understand what justice looks like in your world, what you're willing to do to protect what's yours. And now that you've seen it? Now I know you mean it. When you say you'll protect me and my baby, it's not an empty promise. You'll do whatever it takes, including things that cost you personally. Something shifted in his expression, the rawness giving way to understanding. You're not horrified by what I just did. I'm horrified by betrayal, by people who violate trust for personal gain. What you did was justice, even if it doesn't look like the kind handed down in courtrooms. He cupped my face in both hands, his touch gentle despite the violence he'd just committed. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most damaged. Maybe both. His laugh was startled and genuine. Then his expression grew serious. I meant what I said, Nina. You're mine now. Under my protection. Part of my world. But that comes with expectations. With rules you'll need to follow. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't temporary. This isn't a shelter until you get back on your feet. Once you're part of my organization, once you're under my protection as my woman, there's no going back to who you were before. His woman. The possessive claim should have made me bristle. Instead, it sent warmth through my chest. I don't want to go back, I said honestly. That person was scared and alone and invisible. I'd rather be seen and protected and part of something larger than myself. Even if that something is dangerous, built on violence and moral compromise. Everyone's life is built on compromise. At least yours is honest about it. Rico's smile was slow and devastating. I'm going to marry you. The declaration was so unexpected I could only stare at him. What? Not immediately. After the baby is born. After you've had time to truly understand what life with me entails. But I'm claiming you now, publicly. You'll be known as my woman, which means you're untouchable. No one will dare threaten you or the baby. That's very presumptuous. You haven't even asked if I want to marry you. Do you? I should have said no. Should have insisted on maintaining some independence, some autonomy. But the truth was, I'd never felt safer or more seen than I did in this dangerous man's presence. Ask me again after the baby is born, I said. When I'm thinking clearly, and not hormonal and exhausted. His laugh was rich and warm. Fair enough, but the claiming stands. From this moment, you're under my protection as my woman. Anyone who touches you answers to me. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me with surprising gentleness. I leaned into his embrace, letting myself relax for the first time in 3 years. The danger wasn't gone, the violence wasn't over, but I was no longer facing it alone. Thank you, I whispered against his chest. For seeing me when I was trying so hard to be invisible. I'll always see you, Nina. Whatever name you're using, whoever you pretend to be. I'll always see the real you. As we stood there in that ancient villa, surrounded by the aftermath of betrayal and justice, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The scared girl who'd hidden in a pantry while her father died was gone. The invisible hotel maid who'd scrubbed floors and avoided attention had disappeared. In their place was someone new, someone strong enough to warn a dangerous man about betrayal, someone brave enough to witness justice being served, someone ready to embrace a complicated, dangerous life rather than continue running from her past. I was Rico Marciano's woman. Protected, claimed, valued. And against all logic, all reason, all the warnings my traumatized heart had been screaming for 3 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. 6 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl in the most exclusive private hospital in Manhattan, with Rico holding my hand through every contraction. He'd been there for every doctor's appointment, every midnight craving, every moment of fear and anticipation. "She's perfect," he breathed, holding our daughter with the careful reverence of a man who'd never imagined becoming a father. "What should we call her?" I looked at the tiny face, so peaceful and innocent, and thought about second chances, about finding safety in dangerous places, about loyalty proving stronger than betrayal. "Grace," I said, "for the grace that brought us together." Rico's smile was brilliant. "Grace Marciano. I like it." "Actually," I corrected, feeling bold and certain. "Grace Russo Marciano. So she knows where she came from even while she belongs to where she's going." He looked at me with such love and pride that I felt tears prick my eyes. "Does this mean you'll marry me now? Now that you've had time to think clearly?" I pretended to consider, though we both knew my answer. "Ask me properly." He handed our daughter to the nurse, then knelt beside my hospital bed, pulling out a ring that glittered with subtle elegance. "Nina Russo, whose real name I still don't know and don't care about, who saved my life and changed everything. Will you marry me? Will you make this arrangement permanent? Will you be my wife in every way that matters?" "Yes," I said simply. "Yes to all of it." As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. A mistaken warning, a conspiracy uncovered, a violent world that had somehow become home. I'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible, trying to disappear, and I'd found salvation the moment I chose to be seen. Rico kissed me, gentle and possessive, and I kissed him back with equal fervor. This was my life now. Complicated, dangerous, built on violence and moral compromise, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it.